The wilderness within you. The 17th day of Lent, the Friday of week 3. We have 2 readings from the Bible. The first is Luke 18, verse 17 from the King James Version. Verily I say unto you, whoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child shall in no wise enter therein. And from Matthew 13, verses 14 to 17, the Good News Translation. So, the prophecy of Isaiah applies to them. This people will listen and listen, but not understand. They will look and look, but not see, because their minds are dull, and they have stopped up their ears and have closed their eyes. Otherwise their eyes would see, their ears would hear, their minds would understand, and they would turn to me, says God, and I would heal them. As for you, how fortunate you are. Your eyes see and your ears hear. I assure you that many prophets and many of God's people wanted very much to see what you see, but they could not, and to have what you have, but they did not. We sit side by side on the floor, watching the flames take hold. This time I've got the fire alight easily. First time I did it right. The twigs spurt into flame from the fire creeping up the side of the cardboard, kindled from the crumpled newspaper underneath. The rough edges of the birch logs ignite, and the dried moss catches, then the bark where it grew. It's burning well. Did you want a cup of coffee? I ask. He smiles and shakes his head. No. Okay. I ask him if he wants anything to eat, or if he'd like me to put the TV on, if there's anything he wants to do. Watching the fire is good, he says. I like watching the fire. So we sit there, and the minutes go by. I don't know anyone else whose silence is as comfortable as this. I didn't know I was carrying tension until I feel myself gradually relaxing. I'm the kind of person who looks ahead to the next chore waiting for me, and most of the time in the back of my mind there's a niggling sense of guilt about someone neglected, something unfinished, an approaching deadline, a project incomplete, or even worse, unstarted. But if Jesus has come to be your guest, you don't need to do anything, do you? Just being with him is enough, is the right thing to do. Sitting there quietly, an odd thing begins to happen. I start to get back something I knew I'd lost, but couldn't figure out how to retrieve. The way I used to look at things when I was a child. In childhood, I used to look at things so carefully, intently. I'd gaze with complete absorption at the minute red spider mites gliding along the flagstones in the sun, or at ants bearing their loads back home. I'd bury my hands in peat compost heaped in preparation for gardening work and rejoice in the texture of it. I'd chew grass to really live the taste and lick my knees, which tasted different from my hands. If I found an object and couldn't determine its substance, I'd touch my lips and then my tongue to it, because I knew the tongue touch of glass, metal, plastic. I knew the feeling of things through intimate association. Somewhere along the way, I stopped really looking, feeling, tasting, knowing. Doing supplanted experiencing. Doing slipped, without my really noticing it, into accomplishing. The otherness of anything became a nuisance. I came to view everything as a task. This is the first time in years I have escaped my world of teeming obligations and expectations. To do nothing, think nothing, only gaze into the fire. I suppose in the wilderness, lighting a fire is very important for warmth, for cooking, against insects, for keeping wild animals away. In the wilderness, apart from constructing shelter, the main focus of the day must surely be sourcing and preparing food, hunting, gathering, skinning, gutting, wrapping meat in leaves into parcels skewered by wet twigs, all that kind of thing. So, if you are fasting in the wilderness for 40 days and 40 nights, then you fast from occupation as well as from consumption. You are thrown back onto the waiting, still emptiness of your own self, to simply be who you are. The fire becomes occupation, companion, expression, involvement. Sitting at his side, feeling his stillness, the absolute peace about him as he gazes into the flames without speaking. For a moment it is as though we could have been anywhere. For all its containment in the pseudo-Victorian grate, this fire is a moment of wilderness. For the first time in far too long, I know I am really seeing, really being, and nothing else. We sit there like this for ages. I get bored. I get tired. I wonder what to make for tea. I wonder what he's thinking, whether to suggest a walk. I think I might be cold. No, I'm not. And in between all these wanderings, I come back again and again to the living being of the fire, the beauty of flame and ash, the mystery of heat. I see how it is like a dragon, its curling tongues licking at the next piece of wood, how it has to breathe, has to be fed. The fire is a creature, a person. As Jesus leans forward to place fresh wood when the first is consumed, I see how beautiful are his hands and his face in the firelight, see the texture of his homespun wool robe and the locks of his hair. There is more than one way to see. Most of the time I see pragmatically, assessing, categorising, evaluating, registering information for future use. But this seeing is how I saw in childhood, a union with the other, a leaving of myself to become all sensory awareness, immersed in what I saw. I remember that Jesus taught a lot about learning to see. Every fire I light from this day on will be my escape into wilderness.